Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for one of my favourite videos to do at the end of the year, and that is a horror film ranking. Now I normally do a top 10 horror films from the past year, but this time I'm ranking all 24 horror releases that I've seen in the past 12 months and ranking those from my least favourite to my favourite, from number 24 right down to number 1. Now, a couple of things I want to stress before I start this list. There are a lot of films to get through here, so I don't want to spend too much time on an introduction. But first of all, this is obviously a subjective list. This is my list. It's going to be different from your own list, but that's part of the fun of doing this. Do put your own rankings in the comments, whether that's a top 24 like me, a top 20, a top 10, or maybe just a top 5. Let me know what your favourite horror picks from this past year were. The next thing and the last thing I'm going to say before I start this list is there are actually a few films, a few pretty big names that are horror titles that I completely missed this year. And that was either due to illness or I just couldn't get around to seeing the film when it came out, sadly. So I did have a busy period this year, so that's partly why a couple of pretty big film titles are missing from this list. But do let me know in the comments what you thought of those and if you felt I was missing out when you spot which ones I've missed from this list of 24. Okay, so let's get started. Let's not hang around anymore. At number 24, my least favourite horror film from the year was History of Evil, directed by Bomer Hosseini. Now, the biggest issue with this film was it was just excruciatingly boring. There was potential here. It had, I think, a pretty good idea at its heart of, having this family trying to escape from a police state, as it were, and finding refuge in a haunted house. And that's where the horror elements of the film kick in, really, is in that haunted house. But the film was just very, very slow paced, but there was nothing really to keep you invested in the film during that slow pacing. And overall, it really was a pretty big miss for me, this one, sadly. But there was potential here, but there was just a lot that I didn't really like about the film. It just really was ultimately that every 5 to 10 minutes, I wanted to be doing something else rather than watching this film. And that's an achievement, giving number 23 spot on my list, which goes to Night Swim, another very boring film, I think, from this year. And this film, directed by Bryce McGuire, just felt too forced for me. It was as though this film was just, we could do a haunted swimming pool, but that was about all that was really properly, thought about for this film. The story itself was just very thin. The characters I didn't think were terribly well realised. The execution wasn't very good. There was a very strange anticlimactic ending for me to this film as well, which felt like the film just suddenly cut off and you were supposed to be emotionally invested, but didn't feel really much emotion at all at the end of this particular film. So Night Swim sank rather than Night Swam. My number 22 is In a Violent Nature. This was directed by Chris Nash. And I'm sure many of you maybe like this one a bit more than me if you like the Sasha film, but I just felt it was too focused in on its own token idea of following around the villain from behind through lots of woods throughout most of the film, and therefore it didn't really land for me. This one, again, I found a bit of boredom, although it did at least have the odd entertaining kill, or very graphic kill, should I say, in this film. So that's why it's number 22 for me, In a Violent Nature. Coming in at number 21, the film I've seen most recently actually on this list was Azrael, Angel of Death, starring Samara Weaving. And it's literally her performance that has saved this one from being any lower down on my list, because I thought she was very, very good. But that was really the film's only redeeming feature for me. Some good action sequences, I guess, but the film lacked any dialogue. And despite, other films on this list which lack dialogue, which are a bit higher up, this one didn't really, I think, know what to do with the lack of dialogue, that it seemed to make that choice. There were characters being introduced occasionally in this film, but because of the lack of dialogue and the real lack of investment in feeling that you wanted to get involved in this film, for me, it just again was a miss. And Azrael, Angel of Death, therefore comes in here for me at number 21. At number 20, we got The Watchers, directed by the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan. And this for me was just a very confusing, I suppose slightly Shyamalan-esque film in that way. I really actually enjoyed the final scene in this film, the sort of transformation scene, as it were. I thought that was actually quite beautiful to watch. But a lot of other scenes in this film I just didn't find made a whole lot of sense. It was a bit sort of an uneven film from start to finish. I thought they could have explored the main character Mina, played by Dakota Fanning, and her sort of family backstory a little bit more, and that would have made the film a bit more appealing to me personally. But Watchers here comes in at number 20 as a result. Now at number 19, we've got You'll Never Find Me, perhaps the first maybe hot take. I think I'm sensing a lot of people like this film, but for me, I thought the minimalist setup was done quite well, and there was excellent performances from the two characters of this film, and their interactions kind of, the film did quite well at teasing and teasing and teasing, but that was the problem for me. The film just kept teasing and teasing, no real satisfactory climax. I felt frustrated with the film by the halfway point that it wasn't developing quite enough, for my taste anyway, and that's just my honest reason for why You'll Never Find Me as number 19. It just didn't entertain me enough and didn't involve me enough, despite some of those teasy minimalists, or despite its sort of teasing setup that it had. Number 18 is I Saw the TV Glow, directed by Jane Brown. So I think if the previous choice wasn't controversial, I'm pretty sure this choice, being this low down on the list, will definitely be controversial. Here's the reason though, this is my number 18, is this film, I think it does have an authenticity about it and some clever ideas. I won't deny that at all. And I think that there is, you do sense the identity struggle that is the sort of, for me, the central theme almost of this film. But, despite the sort of nostalgia and some of the film's interesting elements, it's just so low-key. The film, it just has this very low-key vibe and feel, and that's deliberate, but it doesn't work for me as a viewer. So that's why I Saw the TV Glow is only at number 18. I also found this a bit of a struggle to get through, rather like the previous few films on this list. Coming in at number 17, we've got Baghead, directed by Alberto Corredor. Now, actually, time has been kind to this film for me, because on my first watch, I didn't enjoy it all that much. I found it watchable, but didn't enjoy it all that much. Second time around, liked it just that little bit more. I think what I like are the intense sequences with the Bagheads and the way that the Baghead acts as the vessel for the dead, as it were, and I do enjoy some of the scenes involving the Baghead specifically. Otherwise, I do find this another one where the story's a bit uneven. It doesn't invest you enough in the characters to make you care quite enough about what actually happens in the film. That's why Baghead is number 17, but it does have a certain entertainment factor to this one, so that's why it's made it that bit higher than the other films on the list. Now, coming in at number 16, we've got Sting, the first of two spider horror films on this list, and Sting was directed by Kiyoshi Turner, and it kind of has this family, it's a family-based horror almost. It has a family dynamic with a little girl involved, and that, I suppose, is where the tension of the film is somewhat brought in. I do think that some of the spider action sequences are also pretty good, but the problem is there's no one thing that really stands out about this film for me, and that's why it is my number 16. Now, coming in at number 15 is Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney, directed by Michael Mohan. This is a nun-based horror, supernatural horror. It's maybe surprising this is quite low down in my list, but for context, I thought that the second half of this year was a lot stronger than the first half of this year for horror. And Immaculate offered something I thought quite strong for just the first 6 months. Because for me, this is still one of the best films from the first 6 months. And that says a lot about what I thought about the first 6 months of the horror scene for 2024. But anyway, I thought Immaculate, not immaculate as it were, but it was quite good. And Sydney Sweeney's very good lead performance in this film. A couple of moments I really, really enjoyed. That were the sort of scare moments and the shock moments of the film. But overall, again, I suppose time maybe hasn't been as kind to Immaculate as it has been to a few other films on this list. So Immaculate only comes in here at number 15 on my list. Now we move on to number 14, which is The Platform 2, directed by Galder Gaztelu Urrutia. A Spanish name there I've probably not pronounced quite correctly. Now, I really liked The Platform 1, and I think that was my number 1 from 2019 even, in my horror film ranking for that year. So The Platform 2 starts really well for me, but it goes off piste a bit. It does things which I wouldn't have decided to do, I think, if I was involved in this film. The problem is, I think it throws a bit too much at the wall. It throws too many things at the wall. You kind of have this anointed one introduced, these children, these new factions get introduced, new rules with how the platform concept is working and how people are, what they're allowed to eat and so on. And I didn't think all of that was really necessary. I think this film has a strong enough core concept and idea of the platform itself, and people only being able to eat so much from what's on that platform and the characters that are on each level. I think you've got enough there to make this kind of concept work. I love the first film and the concept. It was a great examination of, in a way, of social class and things like that. I really thoroughly enjoyed the first film. But this one just didn't quite land as well. But that said, I actually think this is a worthy sequel just for its first 30 minutes alone, which I still thought were thoroughly entertaining. There is still something here, I think, if you enjoyed the first film, and I would recommend it just watching at least the once if you liked the first platform film. Now at number 13, we've got a surprise that this is as low down as 13 because it was one of my most anticipated horror films of the year. That's Maxine, directed by Ty West, third in the trilogy. But I was just slightly disappointed by this film. Still like the stylistics, the aesthetic, still quite liked Migos' performance as the lead, but I just found this film lost me as it went on. The longer it went on, the more it lost me, the more I felt less enticed by its story, and I much prefer Perla next to this one, to be honest. So a bit disappointing, not a bad film, but just for me, in the context of this trilogy and what we've had before, this one just didn't hit me whatsoever. Coming in at number 12, we've got A Quiet Place Day One, directed by Michael Sarnowski. And this is how you do the non-dialogue film for me, which is where Azrael didn't quite work. Because you've got, first of all, Lupita Nyong'o is excellent in her lead role. I also like Joseph Quinn, and I think their chemistry and their sort of togetherness in the film helps the film. But I think the key difference between this and Azrael was this film, it has scenes which are super intense and really well done and worked, sometimes back to back, and the sequences of those action moments I think are very, very good too. And there is a certain bit more emotional investment in the characters as well. So those things make this a better sort of silent type film, not silent film, but you know what I mean. That's why A Quiet Place Day One is my number 12. Now coming in at number 11, we've got a film I thoroughly enjoyed earlier this year, Lisa Frankenstein, which in the context of when I watched this was easily like the best thing I'd seen. I mean, what came before this in January and February that I'd seen was just really disappointing. So Lisa Frankenstein, at the time I saw it, felt like a masterpiece. And in many ways, there are lots of things I still love about this film. The soundtrack introduced me to the Chameleons, and I've loved listening to Chameleons for pretty much the rest of 2024 since seeing this film. So I've got that to thank you for at least. I just thought some of the comical aspects didn't quite land so much for me with Lisa Frankenstein, but overall it's really good. Good lead performances from Catherine Newton, and I think it's Bo Sprouse, I don't remember his name, but yeah, overall still a fun film. And I love the 80s aesthetic and vibe and the way that's done, and the choice of music and songs is brilliant too here. So my top 10 now. At number 10 we've got Infested, directed by Sebastian Vanecek. This is more of an intense spider horror than the other film I talked about, Sting. This is much more intense, good characters, fairly linear in its feel, but still very, very good, and the spiders are great, the action scenes are great. Much more entertaining, much more kind of a spider horror film I'd want to see than something like Sting maybe. But Sting was still okay. I don't want to kind of slam Sting too much. I still thought that was an okay horror film, but this one is just for me that bit better and more intense to watch. Now we move on to number 9, Abigail, the film I saw on my birthday. Really enjoyed Abigail, particularly the performance of Alicia Ware as the vampire ballerina, and the way that her movements are choreographed, and she's brilliant throughout the whole film, I think, and is, for me, the appeal of the film. I do like the surrounding cast, all the other cast of characters that sort of go into the mansion, and you find out more about them as the film goes on, and that's nicely teased. I mean, it's Bettinelli Olpin directing this, I think, who also directed Ready or Not, so it has that vibe. It's a good film. It's a really solid film, is Abigail, and I thoroughly enjoyed the vampire ballerina. She was brilliant. Coming in at number 8, we've got Late Night with the Devil, which was recommended to me by someone in the comments. Very, very good film. Love the sort of the nostalgic, the kind of late night TV talk show 70s style and aesthetic of this one. The horror moments were absolutely 10s out of 10s. The horror moments in this film were terrific, I thought. Really well executed. And yeah, I was locked into this one pretty much for its whole duration, and that's why it's high up here at my number 8. And coming up at number 7, another one of my highly anticipated films. Yeah, maybe some of you might think this is low down, given that I've been a big fan of the Terrifier films, particularly Terrifier 2. But Terrifier 3 I still thought was very good, certainly very shocking and pushed the boundaries of horror a little more, as Damien Leone tends to do with his Terrifier films. Good slasher though, good kills. If you like your kills in horror, I think you're going to always enjoy the Terrifier films. If you love your gore particularly, this is very brutal, very gory. What you expect from Terrifier, I suppose, but still does what it does pretty well actually. Great lead performance again from Lauren Rivera as Sienna, and I look forward to where they take this with Terrifier 4 actually. I'd be really interested to see the relationship between Sienna and Gabby continue, and I'd like the whole idea of her having to go through maybe hell or an underworld to try and rescue her. I think that's a really good setup for the next film, so look forward to Terrifier 4. So Terrifier 3 is my number 7. Now coming in at number 6, again towards the end of this, we've got Heretic starring Hugh Grant. Really good sort of theological kind of horror with lots of debating between these two girls. For context, two girls are Mormons, and they are missionaries arriving at the home of a reclusive Englishman, Mr. Reed, who is played by Hugh Grant. And it turns out not such a good idea to go into his home, really, because although he's offering blueberry pie, what he really is a total creep, and he's trying to convince them actually about what he thinks about religion. And the way this all unfolds is extremely intellectual. I think it's very intelligent horror, very elevated A24 style horror. I really enjoyed this, but the final act took me slightly out of the film. I found that a little bit confusing, but still a bit of an 8 out of 10 kind of horror film for me, this one. Really, really great stuff from Heretic. Coming in at number 5, we've got Alien Romulus, directed by none other than Fede Alvarez, who I think is a good horror director. And this did what he does best, I think, very, very well. The tension, the face-hugger scenes, the slimy scenes, the close-up scenes were all brilliant. 10 out of 10 for those scenes. I thought the film got a bit too fan-servicey for me, particularly in its final acts, and maybe tried a bit too many things to be a complete success, but still a successful entry in the Alien franchise. That's Alien Romulus, coming in as my number 5. Now next up at 4, we've got Oddity. This was directed by Damien McCarty. This is an Irish horror film. What a surprise for 2024. How good was this one? How good was this film? Loved the positioning of the sculpture throughout the film and how that slightly subtly changes and keeps you totally invested in what's happening there. Really good. I love the TV detective style of this one, the mystery element as well, which sort of made me think of 90s TV detective dramas. All in all, a fantastic horror flick, this one. A surprise coming in as high number 4, Oddity. Great film, highly recommend. Go see that one if you haven't. Now, coming in at number 3 is Longlegs. One of my most anticipated films. Actually, no, it wasn't. This was a surprise. I say it was one of my... I anticipated it as soon as I saw the trailer. And this obviously stars the likes of Michael Monroe, Nicolas Cage. Great performances from them. Silence of the Lambs-esque kind of crime investigation type horror with lots of supernatural elements. I loved this. I thought the style and again the sort of the sound design and the the camera work was excellent. The editing, all of that worked extremely well with the context of what they were going for in this film. Longlegs is therefore my number 3. Now my number 2, the biggest surprise of 2024. The biggest surprise of 2024, that is Speak No Evil. This, of course, had James McAvoy in, and I thought he made the difference for me in many ways as this sort of creepy yet very entertaining villain, playing one half of the couple that he was in. Obviously, if you've not seen the original Speak No Evil, this is about two couples. One couple are very dodgy, the other couple a bit more normal, but they are taken in by the ways of the other couple, but gradually realise that there is something very unsettling about that couple and their child, as it were. So this one explores that more, but it's not as dark. It's not as dark, and you have a slightly more Hollywood-esque ending, I guess, which a lot of people didn't like. But for me, I think that actually worked for this version, this remake. This is one of the best horror remakes I've seen in recent memory as well. Great performances, particularly Mackenzie Davis and James McAvoy were just fantastic. They absolutely killed it in this film. They really did. Their performances are what have elevated this film to its surprise, partly at number 2. Loved it. I found it funny. It had me on the edge of my seat throughout every moment of the film. It's a bit of a thriller, really, almost, as much as it is a horror. But Speak No Evil absolutely, thoroughly deserves its spot at number 2. Could have been my number 1. But for the fact my number 1 is The Substance. And, you know, if you've seen or heard about, you've probably heard about The Substance by now. It's been talked about very thoroughly by a lot of people. It's a fantastic body horror film that explores, obviously, the way that women are viewed, I think, as, you know, with beauty standards by Hollywood, and really sort of hammers home a message about that, and you know, I think it does it in a very unsubtle but very successful way. Lots of kind of really graphic scenes that won't be for everybody, but that's what I love about this film. It doesn't hold back. It absolutely is a top-notch horror film for me. 9 out of 10 probably is what I'd maybe give The Substance. I thought it was superb. Great performances from Demi Moore. We see a comeback of some of these 90s stars like Demi Moore and Hugh Grant at the moment in horror, and it's fantastic to see. Demi Moore is worthy of an Oscar, I think, for her performance in this film. For me personally, what an absolutely phenomenal horror film. Stylistically loved it. As I say, the story, you know, it's not, there's not a lot there. It's all based on this concept of this substance that, you know, you activate it, that you have to switch bodies every 7 days, and it's fascinating actually as a concept in and of itself. So you have that too. Man, what I also love about this film is other message though. For me, I think it can appeal to just about everybody in the way that we all seek better versions of ourselves. I think, you know, often think I like to find that better version of myself sometimes, and man, this film will make you think in that way, I think, by its powerful execution. And thank you very much for watching. This has been a long video, so long that even my screensaver is gone. Thank you very much. Do drop a like and a sub to the channel. I enjoy making these videos, and doing so encourages me to continue to make more. Until next time, until the next big list video, it's bye for now.